Israel's military has announced the launch of a significant operation in the northern West Bank, marking a new phase in the ongoing conflict between Israeli forces and Palestinian armed groups in the region. The operation, described by the Israeli government as broad, is part of Israel's ongoing efforts to assert control over the West Bank, which has been under Israeli occupation since the 1967 Six-Day War. The announcement comes amid rising tensions in the region, where violence has escalated over the past several years, particularly since the outbreak of the war in Gaza more than 2 years ago. The Israeli government stated that the operation is aimed at targeting Palestinian militant groups that Israel accuses of carrying out terrorist activities in the West Bank. The military action, which involves the Israeli Defense Forces, the Shin Bet Security Service, and Israel Police, has sparked concern among both local and international observers, as the region has witnessed significant casualties on both sides in recent months. Shosh Bedrosian, the official spokesperson for the Israeli government, addressed the media on Wednesday, stating that the operation was a necessary measure in order to maintain Israeli security and combat terrorism in the West Bank. She made it clear that Israel will not tolerate any threat to its citizens, soldiers, or security forces, especially those coming from Palestinian armed factions. There will be no safe haven for terrorists in Judea and Samaria, Bedrosian said, referring to the areas of the West Bank that Israel controls. The IDF, Shin Bet, and Israel Police continue to act forcefully to thwart terrorist activities and will find anyone who harms or threatens our citizens, soldiers, and security forces. The use of the terms Judea and Samaria by the Israeli spokesperson is significant, as these are the biblical names used by Israel for the West Bank. These territories are at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with Palestinians viewing them as part of a future independent state. Israel's occupation of the West Bank has been a point of contention in international diplomacy and is central to the broader Middle East peace process. In the days following the announcement of the operation, the Israeli military began its deployment in several areas of the northern West Bank. The operation reportedly targets Palestinian armed factions, particularly those suspected of launching attacks on Israeli civilians and soldiers in the past. The military has indicated that it will continue to intensify its actions until it has neutralized the perceived threat from these groups. The announcement of the operation is part of a broader escalation of violence in the West Bank, which has been ongoing for months. Since the beginning of the war in Gaza more than 2 years ago, the West Bank has seen a sharp rise in violence. Palestinian groups have carried out numerous attacks against Israeli soldiers and civilians, and in response, Israeli forces have launched numerous military operations in the region, including raids on Palestinian villages and towns, and the arrest of Palestinian militants. According to Palestinian Authority data, more than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since the conflict's escalation began, including many civilians as well as fighters. The violence has disproportionately affected Palestinian civilians, many of whom have been caught in the crossfire between Israeli forces and Palestinian militants. Many of these deaths have occurred during Israeli military raids, operations, and clashes between Israeli soldiers and Palestinian fighters. On the Israeli side, at least 43 Israeli citizens, including both soldiers and civilians, have been killed since the start of the intensified violence in the West Bank. These casualties have occurred during attacks by Palestinian militants or as a result of Israeli military operations. The growing number of fatalities on both sides has contributed to the heightened tensions in the region and made any potential peace process more difficult. Despite the escalation in the West Bank, the truce in Gaza, which went into effect on October 10th, remains in place. The Gaza ceasefire has been a significant development in the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as it has temporarily halted hostilities between Israeli forces and Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza. However, while the situation in Gaza has seen a degree of de-escalation, violence in the West Bank has continued unabated. Israel's operation in the northern West Bank comes amid this backdrop of heightened violence. The Israeli government has made it clear that its primary goal is to neutralize what it considers to be terrorist threats in the region. The government has characterized Palestinian militant factions in the West Bank as a significant security risk to Israeli civilians, soldiers, and the broader security situation in the area. The operation has already drawn international attention, with several countries expressing concern over the potential for further escalation in the region. The violence in the West Bank has led to widespread condemnation from various international organizations, including the United Nations and human rights groups. These organizations have repeatedly called for a cessation of hostilities and a return to negotiations, but such calls have largely gone unheeded by both Israel and the Palestinian factions. The military operation has also raised concerns about the humanitarian impact on Palestinian civilians in the West Bank. The ongoing violence has caused significant disruptions to daily life, with many Palestinians living in fear of military incursions, airstrikes, and other forms of violence. Many Palestinians have been displaced from their homes as a result of the Israeli military's actions, and there are growing concerns about the humanitarian toll the conflict is taking on Palestinian civilians, especially in terms of casualties, displacement, and infrastructure damage. Israel's response to the violence has included an increased military presence in the West Bank, with troops deployed in various towns and villages in the northern part of the territory. Israeli soldiers have conducted raids on suspected militant hideouts, arrested Palestinian suspects, and confiscated weapons and ammunition. In addition, the IDF has also targeted infrastructure that it believes is being used to support militant operations, including tunnels, weapons caches, and safe houses. The ongoing operations in the West Bank have sparked protests and resistance from Palestinian groups, which continue to denounce Israel's actions and accuse it of violating international law by occupying Palestinian land and targeting civilians. Palestinian leaders have vowed to continue fighting against Israeli forces, despite the overwhelming military superiority of Israel. As Israel's operation unfolds, the situation in the West Bank remains tense, with no immediate signs of de-escalation. The Israeli military has indicated that it will continue to target Palestinian militant groups in the region until they are neutralized, but the outcome of the operation remains uncertain. International calls for de-escalation have intensified, but Israel has expressed its determination to continue with its military campaign, emphasizing that it will not allow any threats to its security. The government maintains that the operation is necessary to protect Israeli civilians and soldiers from Palestinian militant attacks. In conclusion, Israel's military operation in the northern West Bank marks a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict between Israeli forces and Palestinian armed groups. While the operation is aimed at targeting what Israel considers to be terrorist threats, it has already resulted in casualties and raised concerns about the humanitarian impact on Palestinian civilians. The operation highlights the deepening violence in the region and the continued challenges in efforts to achieve peace. With tensions running high, it remains to be seen how the situation will evolve in the coming weeks.